Shalom, Israel. Most High in Christ bless. Can everybody hear me and see me clearly? And do I have a scribe on deck for today? Can I get a brother to scribe for me? Can I get a brother to scribe for me? All right, Malachi, you on deck. You on deck. We're going through Esther, the book of Esther today, chapters 2 through 5. We finished up Nehemiah and did Esther chapter 1 yesterday. So, as y'all know, I like to do a recap. Chapter 1 in Esther, is the introduction of Ahasuerus, a.k.a. Xerxes the First. Ahasuerus is the same Xerxes. Oh, Josiah, if you can't see, you might want to try checking the thing again. You know how Esau do. They block us in certain places. They got an algorithm that they use to stop sometimes they can stop the notifications from going out, or they can just reset your notifications on your page. So look for that. All right, so Ahasuerus is the same Xerxes. In the first chapter, you had Vashti, who had spirits on her. She was pretty rich and thought that she could disrespect the king. And that didn't go too well. Vashti thought she can get that high dollar, that high value man. That didn't go too well. So we're going to start with chapter 2. All right? The book of Esther, chapter 2, verse 1. Malachi, you on deck with the scribe. All right? So Esther, chapter 2, verse 1. It says, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be a fair young virgin sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hegi, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. I want to stop right there real quick, because it said, fair young virgins to the house of women. This ain't talking about no 12-year-old. This is talking about women. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7 real quick. Let the Bible explain what a virgin is. The book of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 34. There is a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. So, it said, they went out through all of the provinces to seek fair young virgins. I'm going to read it again. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman, see what they call the virgin? The virgin is called an unmarried woman, not a little girl. And it goes down to say she that is married. We know that she that is married is the wife. The unmarried woman is the virgin. Back to Esther chapter 2. So when it said that they sought out young virgins, young women of marriageable age. Esther chapter 2, verse 4. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So this is giving you a lapse in time on when Mordecai was put into captivity during the Persians and Medes. All right? So it said, he was the son of those who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity that had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So Hadassah, also known as Esther. And you know what's crazy? Them Old Testament Israelites don't never say nothing about the book of Esther, because Esther is not a Hebrew name. The Persian name. And it's after Ishtar. Hadassah was taken in by her uncle. Mordecai was Esther's uncle. All right? Verse 8. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, the keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her, out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. So Esther was what we would call racially ambiguous. Esther didn't look like she was an Israelite, but she was. She was from the tribe of Benjamin. She did not look like a normal Israelite. She was racially ambiguous. That's why we're not supposed to judge after the sight of our eyes. If people's spirit bear witness with this Bible, that's all we can go off on. Because when it says Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, you couldn't just look at Esther and say, oh, that's a black girl. Or she looks like she's Hispanic. You couldn't tell what she was. Verse 12. Now when every maid's turn was come to go into the king Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so are the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. So back in the day, They had a 12-month period. Like even IUIC started it. They call it the Esther Challenge or the Hadassah Challenge. And basically, for 12 months, for a certain amount of time, well, in the scriptures, for 12 months, they purified themselves with myrrh and oils and sweet odors. Because our women, that's what we did. That's what our women did. Our women always smelled good. Always. Verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her, to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. And in the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaagaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. So the king had certain houses that were set aside for his concubines. I'm going to say it again. The king had houses for his concubines. They didn't all live in the same house. He had houses. And trust me, this king was the king of Persia. He was not an Israelite. He had houses laid out for all of his concubines and wives. Verse 15. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto the king Ahasuerus into his house. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So Esther was so bad that Esther was chosen above all of the women. Why? Because that's what our women are. They're above all women. Verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the crown, the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So Esther listened to her uncle. Though Esther was just made queen, she still was subject to her uncle. She still listened to her uncle. Verse 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, the two king chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those that kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. So these dudes were straight up plotting a coup against the king. They was plotting a coup against Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So, just like us, the Israelites, we used to write down our chronicles. We used to write down the events and subjects that happened in our history. Okay? That's what a lot of people don't understand about the Bible. The Bible is written by the scribes and the prophets of that time. They were writing down our history and the things that the Lord told them to write. So did the other nations. The other nations have history books, their chronicles. What happened this? What happened then? What happened to this king? What happened to that king? If there was a major event, they wrote it down. Much like what we do. We write things down. If there are major events, we write them down. When did this happen? Or what happened in the 7th year of this captivity? It happened in the 130th year of that captivity. We came out in this place. We walked there. This happened. This person did that. This person did that. That's what we do. And the reason why Mordecai told this thing to the king and let it be known, go to Jeremiah chapter 29. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7, it says, "And seek the peace of the city whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof ye shall have peace." So this was Jeremiah told by the Lord, tell Israel, whenever you go into captivity, especially when you go into Babylon, pray for the peace of the city, because in that peace, you're going to have peace. Imagine if these two guys would have actually got away with the coup that they had against the king. What would life have been like for our people under the dominion of those two men? So, if Esther found favor and the Israelites found favor, why not keep that king where he is? And if there's something against him, that's why Mordecai went ahead and did what he did. And later on is going to prove that because he did this thing, it helped us out as a nation, as a body. We're going to get to it. Not today, but we're going to get to it in the rest of Esther. All right? This is chapter 3, verse 1. "After these things, the king Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him." Now, I know a lot of people may not remember when it says Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. Go to 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 20. I want y'all to remember this. This is why it behooves us. Is that 1 Kings? No, 1 Samuel. That was the wrong thing. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 20. Yes, 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 20. I'll fix that later. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 20. It says, "And Saul said unto Samuel, Yea, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought Agag the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the spoil, and the sheep, and the oxen, and the chief things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord in Gilgal, to the Lord thy God in Gilgal." So, when Samuel was telling Saul, go utterly destroy the Amalekites, man, woman, child, sheep, kill everything. Don't let nothing. He actually saved the king Agag alive. Now Samuel later killed him, but the men and the women, they still were living. So Agag's seed still lives. How do we know that? Because Haman was a descendant of Agag. Haman was an Amalekite. He was from Amalek. And because he was from Amalek, you're going to see the deep disdain that he has for our people, much like Amalek has today. Back to Esther chapter 3, start at verse 1 again. It said, "After these things, the king Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. And Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then was Haman full of wrath. See, we were always known. Now, they're always getting on us about this American flag thing, whatever. This guy Haman wanted everybody, whenever he came around, to just bow down and reverence him. That's not what we do. That's not what we do at all. And he said, they said they spoke to him daily. They spoke to Mordecai daily like, bro, you tripping. You need to go ahead and bow down to Haman, bro. And Mordecai like, I'm not bowing down to nobody. You want to see why? Go to the editions of Esther in the Apocrypha, chapter 13. We're going to start at verse 11. Let me get straight to the point. The book of Additions to Esther, chapter 13, starting at verse 11. So when Haman came around, everybody bowed down except Israel. Much like when they played the music and the psaltery and the cornet and the harp and all that stuff in Babylon, and the brothers that was with Daniel, the three holy children, they didn't bow down. Same way. Same way. Same way we're going to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Because we don't pledge allegiance to nobody. Except the Lord. The book of Esther, chapter 13, verse 11. Now this is Mordecai praying. It says, Thou art Lord of all things, and there is no man that can resist thee, which art the Lord. Thou knowest all things, and thou knowest, Lord, that it was neither in contempt nor pride, nor for any desire of glory, that I did not bow down to proud Haman. For I could have been content with good will for the salvation of Israel to kiss the soles of his feet. But I did this, that I might not prefer the glory of man above the glory of God. Neither will I worship any but thee, O God. Neither will I do it in pride. So Mordecai already had it in his head. I'm not bowing down to nobody but the Lord. That's it. You're not God, and you're not going to make me bow down to him. Now, if this was for the salvation of Israel, and our lives were on the line, all right, you got to do what you got to do. That's what he was saying. But this wasn't for the salvation of Israel. Because my niece is married to the king of all of this. So as long as she's in her position, Israel is just fine. But with him, I don't have to worship him. I don't have to bow down to him. Back to Esther chapter 3 and verse 6. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So because Mordecai didn't bow down to him, he wanted to give all of us the death penalty. And that's what we have to understand. Edom hates us. They hate us. He wanted to kill everybody, not just Mordecai. He wanted to kill all of us. That's what they try to do. They try to erase. The people who win wars erase the others out of history, especially back in the day. They will write you out of history because you lost. Verse 7. In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people of all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it to the king's treasury. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given you, and the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good unto thee. Now, this guy does what Esau does best. They put hits out on people. This was what Haman was doing. He was putting a hit out on the entire nation of Israel. All of the Jews, everybody that went against. So that's what they do. Much like with the SPLC. Like, oh, they have laws that are contrary. They go contrary to LGBT community, or they go contrary to the establishment of religion. They go contrary to everything. They're just a pain. You wouldn't want these people around. That's what they did back then. But guess what? They're doing the same thing today. When you look at how Haman went to the king and said the same thing, you can see even our own people going to the other nations, the enemies of the nation of Israel, and say, hey, these people, they're a hate group. You don't want to do nothing with them. You might want to stop them while you have the chance. It was written back then for our learning. Verse 12. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post unto all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. That sounds familiar. He was an Agagite. You don't think that he knew his family history? That was his opportunity to avenge his people? When Agag was supposed to be totally destroyed, man, woman, and children, everything was supposed to be destroyed, but he wanted to do that same thing to us. Verse 14. The copy of the writing for commandment to be given in every province was published unto all the people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Amon sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Chapter 4. So remember, this guy, Haman, he came with the decree to actually get our people murdered and killed, destroy everybody. Much like how we were supposed to destroy them. He wanted to get that. Chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out in the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. You got to think about it. You get a report. Let's bring it to today. You get a report. You turn on the news. You go on Facebook, and there's a decree to kill every black, Hispanic, and Native American in the country. Anybody who historically is the descendant of the nation of Israel, and they know who we are. Imagine if there was a decree to kill all of us. We wailing now looking at what they're doing to Northern Kingdom in Arizona and New Mexico in them concentration camps. We wailing now with the police having free reign to just shoot us in the street. We wailing now with that. Imagine if it was a law, a decree that went out to kill all of our people. Imagine that. This is what they were going through. Verse 4. So Esther's maids and the chamberlains came and told her. Then was the queen exceeding grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, who had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that happened unto him, and the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go unto the king, and make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. So, just like I said earlier, Mordecai knew, as long as my niece is married to the king, we're good, because we have an end, we have a gateway, a mediator, so to speak. Now that the decree went out, Mordecai was like, look, Esther, you got to use your influence that you have on the king, and you got to make this thing happen. You got to help us. Let's read on. Verse 10. Again, Esther spake unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except to such whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto him, unto the king's house, these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. So Esther made an excuse. Esther made an excuse. You're the baddest woman in the kingdom. You married to the king. You got this dude heart and soul. And yet you mean to tell me that you can't go talk to him for us? For real? Let's read on. Chapter 13. Verse 13. And that's a lot of y'all sisters. Y'all have that same ability. A lot of y'all sisters are put in better positions than a lot of black men. So you need to use your influence, your power that you've been given to help out your people. You have to. If you don't, this is going to happen. Verse 13. Then Mordecai commanded an answer to answer Esther. Think not within thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So Mordecai was like, look, if you hold your peace, God is going to raise somebody else up, and you and your family are going to get put to death. Because that's the reason why you're living today. That's why he said, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Like, who even knows why you were picked? The Lord knows why you were picked. You were picked by the king, handpicked by the king, because you were supposed to serve this role right here. And if you don't serve this role right here that the Lord put in your lap, guess what? Bad things are going to happen to you. Much like our sisters today. A lot of y'all have a lot of position and a lot of power with Esau that y'all could use for the benefit of the nation of Israel. Now, if you don't choose to use it, guess what? Somebody else is going to use it. There will be deliverance. You cannot hold back the salvation of Israel. You're either going to help along with the deliverance, or you're going to be left behind and you're going to still be delivered. Verse 15. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go, gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. So that's when she had to get, you got to put her in check. Don't think because you're the queen that you out of this. No. So Esther, she got her mind right. She said, you know what? You're right. Because go to 2nd Ezra chapter 4. You got to understand, we kept Chronicles for a reason. First Ezra chapter 4, not second. First Ezra chapter 4. We had Chronicles for a reason. We wrote things down for a reason. That's why Paul said in Romans 15:4, the things that were written aforetime were written for our learning. There is a reason why Mordecai was not just going to accept that crap of an answer from Esther, knowing we are the people that are full of wisdom. God gave wisdom to us, so we know how things work. Watch this. First Ezra, chapter 4. Let me just get to the point. Verse 28. Verse 28. First Ezra chapter 4, verse 28. Remember, this is Zerubbabel giving the king an answer about women and truth. This portion is about women. This portion is about women. All right? Now watch. Verse 28. And now do you not believe me? Is not the king great in his power? Do not all regions fear to touch him? Yet did I see him and Apami, the king's concubine, the daughter of the admirable Bardicus, sitting at the right hand of the king. And taking the crown from the king's head and sitting it upon her own head, she also struck the king with her left hand. So the king, remember how much the king does not play. The king, because a woman told him no, removed her from being queen and made another woman queen. The king has a decree to put people to death or to save a life. And yet, the king let his woman take his crown off of his head and put it on her head, and she smacked him in the face. Verse 31. And yet for all this, the king gaped and gazed upon her with open mouth. He's like, I can't believe she did that. Why? Because women can do stuff to men that men normally wouldn't tolerate. But because that's the woman that we love or the woman that we want, you tolerate certain things out of them. Certain things that you would never accept from nobody else, you'll let it fly with that one. You'll let it fly with that one. And they got people that see that. If she laughed upon him, he laughed also. But if she took any displeasure at him, the king was fain to flatter, that she might be reconciled to him again. O ye men, how can it not be but women should be strong, seeing they do thus? So, we already knew. We can go back and read the wisdom of Zerubbabel and how he told the king himself, like, look, you may be strong, but women are stronger. Women control you. Because yeah, you may be the big bad king, but guess what? To the woman that you love, nothing. So when Esther said, well, can't nobody go into the king unless he get called because, you know, they might put us to death. What? He going to put you to death. The one that he picked above all women of the province. He's really going to put you to death. You better get your mind right and stop playing. Telling you. Women got a lot of power. Women got a lot of power. Chapter 5, verse 1. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. She wasn't called. The king didn't call her by name. As soon as he saw that it was Esther, he's like, oh, yeah, you know. Yeah. Hey, come on up here. Why? Because that's what women do that. Women find favor in the eyes of a man. Verse 3. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given to thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. And the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. So imagine that. The woman come to you unannounced. You let her up, and she said, Look, I made a feast for y'all. Tell you and your second in command that, y'all can come on and eat because I made a feast for y'all. You not, man, what? You not about to do nothing to her. You about to listen to every request that she has. Why? Because that's what women do. That's why I like the book of Esther. It shows both sides of women. It shows the good side, what they should be, and it also shows the wicked side, what they should not be. Because Vashti was going to put a spirit on all of the women to rebel, much like the women did in the 60s and 70s. White women put a spirit on all of our sisters to rebel against their man. And look at the danger and the harm that it's done in the black community. Because they want to follow another person's example, who has a man still today. You don't see a bunch of them living on welfare and stuff with no man in the house. There are some, but it ain't the majority like us. Verse 6. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? It shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. So even though the decree went out to get all our people murdered, Mordecai still ain't bowed down to this dude. Like, I'd rather meet my demise than to bow down to you. Because you prideful. You prideful. Verse 10. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself. And when he was come, he sent and called for his friend Zeresh and his wife. So, Haman, he looked at Mordecai like, don't worry about this dude. Your end is coming. The cake's been baked. I'm telling you. That's what Haman was thinking. So Haman went and called his friends Zeresh and his wife. Oh, Zeresh is Haman's wife. Verse 11. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above all the princes and servants of the king. Like I said before, you don't think Haman knew about everything that went on with his forefathers? How the nation of Israel was supposed to destroy them, but they didn't? Of course they did, because Esau talk. They talk about their problems, they talk about their issues, and they talk about what their goals is. They explain everything. Oh, yeah, the king did this, and I did that, and I got this, and I got that. Yeah, that's what they do. Verse 12. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow I'm invited unto her also with the king. So he was bragging. He was like, man, look, they had a private dinner. Wasn't nobody able to come except for me, because, I am that Haman, that Redman, that devil. Verse 13. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Now look, all of the stuff that I just told y'all, that don't even mean nothing as long as I got to keep looking at Mordecai. This dude just drives me up the wall. Verse 14. Then said Zeresh's wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet, and the thing pleased him, and he caused the gallows to be made. So whose idea was that the gallows should be made, and And Mordecai hung there on? Esau's wife. Haman's wife. Yeah. Wonder why? Because they woman is in cahoots with them. They woman is in cahoots with them. You better believe it. All their ideas, who you think sows the mask when they put on for the KKK? Who you think makes the signs? Who was in on the heights when they came and got us from Africa? They just don't like the payout. But they was down for it. Just like that, it was her idea to hang Mordecai in the gallows. It was Esau's wife's idea. Just like Esau's wives today. All their little ideas, they don't come up with half that stuff themselves. They women be coming up with that. They women help them to destroy us. Tell you, don't trust your enemies. And that is it for the 4 chapters a day. Is there any questions pertaining to the 4 chapters that were read today? I know it goes quick. It's not a whole lot of, precepts. It's just a bunch of history. So, excuse the sun. I know I'm bright, but, sun always up in here. Let's see. There you go. Any questions based on what was read today in these 4 chapters? Ali Grant, go on IsraelUnite.org and go to Contact Us. And if you're trying to reach the P.O. Box, the New York Congregation P.O. Box, look on the Contact Us page. It should be up there. Or you can send an email. When y'all reading their history, put yourselves in their position. Put yourselves there. Elder always did say, visualize it. Put yourself there. Feel what they feel. Go through what they go through. It'll help you to picture it more. It'll help you to understand it more. Especially if you got a lot of life experience and you didn't have Edomites look at you all crazy and stuff because you wasn't the one to bow down to them or, whatever. All right. If nobody don't have any questions, shalom, y'all. Most High in Christ bless. Stay in the spirit.